After a few years looking for a way to return to reality, Freddy Krueger had a new idea and decided to go to the only person who could make his victims remember his existence. Meanwhile, in the middle of a lake surrounded by a dense forest, a student jumps into the water to swim for a few minutes, but suddenly, she begins to hear noises of someone watching her. Frightened, the woman tries to run, but before she can do so, she is surprised by a macabre figure who begins to chase her. During her escape, she ends up tripping and falling to the ground, and realizing that she has no idea where she is, the student tries to keep silent so that she won't be found by her pursuer. At that moment, the woman is surprised by none other than the dreaded Jason Voorhees, who plunges his machete through her body, trapping her in one of the trees. However, before he leaves, the masked monster begins to have bizarre illusions, where he sees his victim transforming into other people, and soon afterwards, he comes across his mother. After congratulating her son, Miss Voorhees tells him that she has a new task for him to fulfill and orders Jason to leave for Elm Street, because the children there need to be taught a lesson, since they have been misbehaving lately. Without thinking twice, the masked monster sets off for the place, without even imagining that his mother is none other than Freddy Krueger, who has used his powers to manipulate his mind. Far away, in one of the houses on Elm Street, Gib is having a good time with his friends Kia and Lorie, where they chat while consuming a few drinks, without even realizing that they are being watched by someone outside. A few minutes later, the doorbell starts ringing, and in order to answer it, Gib throws his cigarette away, causing it to hit Jason in the head, who is standing right in front of the house. When she opens the door, she meets her boyfriend Trey, who reveals that he brought his friend Blake with him, as the girls were looking for a possible partner for Lorie. At that moment, the power in the house stops working, and Trey decides to go up to the second floor with Gib. And after a few minutes of conversation, she decides to take a shower. Meanwhile, Trey stays in bed to wait for his partner to return, but when he turns around to get a drink, he ends up being surprised by Jason, who unleashes several attacks on his back. Immediately afterwards, the masked monster pulls the ends of the bed with his arms, causing the young man to bend backwards. Confused by the noises she's hearing, Gib approaches the door to see if Trey is all right, and when she sees blood dripping from under the crack, she decides to open it to find out what's going on. When she sees her boyfriend lying lifeless on his bed, she starts screaming in panic, and in a few seconds, everyone rushes outside in despair. At that moment, a car approaches the scene, and after noticing the group screaming in the streets, Officer Stubbs wastes no time in calling in reinforcements. After investigating Trey's elimination, the officers meet to talk to the other victims of the incident, and Stubbs hands a glass of water to Lorie, who asks why they are receiving questions about her recent dreams. However, the officer says he has no idea what's going on, and reveals that he moved to the city about a month ago, so he still doesn't know what happened in that place in the past. Noticing that the officer is talking to Lorie, the sheriff orders him to leave the room, and the student tries to remember the name of the police officers who came to the house. Thanks to this, she realizes that the men were saying the name Freddy, and as soon as she remembers this, the woman notices that the police station has become completely empty. Confused, she starts walking around the place looking for the police officers, and a few minutes into her search, Lorie comes across a little girl lying on the ground. Noticing that the little girl seems to be crying, the student approaches her to understand what is going on, but as she does so, she realizes that the girl's eyes have been removed. Frightened by what she's seeing, Lorie tries to move away, and soon after, the girl reveals that Freddy is coming, and that everyone should be alerted. During the conversation, the young girl ends up being teleported to another place, where she sees the tombstones of all the victims eliminated by Freddy, along with a trio of girls, who jump rope while singing the Dream Monsters song. Blake returns home, where he argues with his father, who questions why his son was out so late at night, as he should have stayed at home to look after his sister. Angry, the young man asks the man to leave him alone for a while so that he can mourn the elimination of his best friend. Now that he's alone, Blake remembers the name the policeman said in front of the girl's house and declares that he's going to capture Freddy so that he can avenge Trey. At that moment, the young man notices a strange movement in the garden in front of him, and approaches to check what it is, but in doing so, he ends up seeing a goat staring at him from a distance. Soon after, Blake is surprised by Freddy Krueger, who tries to eliminate him with his silhouette, but the attack doesn't injure his victim, allowing him to escape safely. Thanks to this, Freddy notices that his powers have not yet been completely reinvigorated, and decides to wait a while longer, leaving Jason to eliminate his target on his own. Blake then wakes up on his balcony bench and realizes that it was all just a bad dream. He also notices that his father is sitting next to him and pushes him to get his attention. In doing so, however, Blake ends up knocking the man's head off, which is removed by Jason, who comes up right behind him. Before he can react, the young man is hit by the monster's machete, which eliminates him instantly. Far away, in the middle of a psychiatric hospital, Will finds out about the recent eliminations on the news and asks the staff member to turn up the television, but the man ignores him and turns it off. Irritated, the patient starts shouting and is pulled away by his friend Mark, who asks him to try and calm down. Trying to explain why he's worried, he says that this is Lorie's home and he wants to know if she's all right. When he hears this, Mark tells him that they won't have any chance of leaving, because from now on, they are under the total control of the hospital staff. Later, the pair talk in their room, and Will explains that he doesn't care what the doctors think about his accounts, because he knows that everything he witnessed in the past was completely real. Despite being reluctant about the whole thing, Mark decides to help his friend escape from the psychiatric hospital, and the next day, he tries to get the attention of one of the inspectors. Noticing that the patient seems to have suddenly gone mad, the man decides to sedate him with one of his syringes, causing him to lose his strength. After being taken back to his room, Mark meets Will again, who asks him why he did it. The young man then reveals that he managed to steal the inspector's set of keys, and thanks to this, the pair finally managed to escape from the psychiatric hospital. In the morning, Lorie tries to stay awake so that she won't be attacked by Freddy Krueger, and after saying goodbye to her father, she sets off towards her school. At the same time, the sheriff appears and reveals to Dr. Campbell about Will and Mark's recent escape, leaving the man worried. However, the officer asks him not to be afraid, because this time they will capture Freddy Krueger before any more tragedies happen. At the town's high school, Lorie is shocked to receive the news of Blake's elimination, who has been eliminated along with his father. Despite their confusion, the girls decide to carry on with their school day, and while walking through the corridors, Lorie comes across Linderman, who expresses his feelings about the recent eliminations. Soon after, Kia and Gib try to understand why their friend couldn't sleep last night, and the young woman tries to explain everything she saw during her nightmares. Just then, Mark appears on the scene and claims that the figure Lorie saw is none other than Freddy Krueger, a terrible and evil villain. At the same time, Will approaches the group, asking the young man to stop scaring his friends. As soon as she meets her old friend again, Lorie collapses, knocking her unconscious. Worried, Kia shouts for the students to call for the nurse, and when they notice the principal approaching, Will and Mark move away from the corridors. Minutes later, Lorie lies resting in the infirmary, while Gib and Kia wait for her in the waiting room. Trying to find something to deal with her boredom, Kia starts reading one of the magazines about plastic surgery, but as she does so, she ends up being surprised by Freddy, who sticks his claws into her nose, removing a piece of her face. Thanks to this, the student wakes up next to Gib in the waiting room, and realizing that it was all just a bad dream, she throws it away. Hours later, Mark and Will check some records of the attacks that happened in the past, and the young man concludes that the reason they were locked up in the hospital was to hide Freddy's existence. So Will decides to go to Lorie's house so that he can protect her from the dream monster, and Mark says he'll stay at his house. Later, the young people of the town hold a party in the middle of a large cornfield. During the party, Will shows up and starts talking to Lorie about the incident that happened at her house, trying to understand how Freddy could have suddenly resurfaced. At the same time, Gib walks to a denser area of the cornfield to get away from the noise, at which point she comes across Trey, who orders her to follow him immediately. Without thinking twice, the young woman decides to obey her boyfriend's orders, and starts to cross the plantation, ending up in front of two power towers. Confused, Gib enters the plantation to look for Trey, at which point she is surprised by Freddy, who appears right in front of her. In a panic, the young woman tries to escape from the tower, but the exit door disappears, and as she approaches, she is startled by a macabre head that tries to attack her through the wall. What she doesn't realize is that it was just a bad dream, as she fell asleep in the middle of the cornfield. Just then, one of the young men finds his colleague lying on the ground and approaches her to find out what's going on. Back in the nightmare, Gib runs through the corridors in search of a way out, but Freddy manages to corner her at every turn, so that she has no choice but to hide in one of the lockers. However, the student is easily found by the monster, who prepares to eliminate her, but at that moment, Gib ends up having her body destroyed by an attack from Jason, who manages to find her in the middle of the plantation. Thanks to this, the young woman has her body removed from Freddy's dreams, who is furious when he realizes that Jason is capable of stealing his victims. After eliminating Gib, the masked monster throws the student away and then walks over to the other students, who are drinking while watching the party. When they see Jason in front of them, the pair begin to mock his appearance, causing him to lose his temper and turn the head of one of them with his bare hands. Frightened, the other student uses one of the torches to set fire to his enemy and runs to avoid being caught. Despite the flames, Jason doesn't give up, and after grabbing his machete, he begins to chase his target, causing a gigantic trail of fire wherever he goes. Trying to escape, the young man runs back to the rest of the youngsters, but he is easily eliminated by Jason, who hits him with his flaming blade. In a panic, dozens of students start running away, while others attack the monster, who begins to eliminate everyone around him. During the fight, Jason ends up destroying one of the barrels of booze, which splashes towards him, causing the flames to be extinguished from his body. While fleeing the scene, Lorie and her friends come across Gibbs' body, and so that they won't be next, they run to Will's van, allowing them to escape the party safely. Despite this, Jason continues to claim several victims around the place, eliminating all the students who get close to him. To keep everyone safe, Will leaves all the members of the group at home, and before saying goodbye to Lorie, he decides to reveal what he knows about his father. He explains that Dr. Campbell was responsible for the elimination of his wife, who was stabbed to elimination in her sleep. Upon hearing this, Lorie goes into a state of shock, and before they can continue talking, the pair are surprised by the young woman's father, who orders her out of the vehicle immediately. Campbell then orders Will to stay away from his daughter, and begins to threaten him, causing the student to run home terrified by the confrontation. Trying to calm her down, the man runs up to Lorie and says that he'll be able to explain everything the next day, so she should just try to get some sleep. However, Lorie refuses to do this, and when she discovers that her father knew about Will being locked up in hospital, she realizes that her father has been lying all this time, and runs off to her room. In a rage, the man tries to destroy the door to get to his daughter, and in order to escape from there, the young woman decides to climb down through her window. Soon afterwards, Lorie is running desperately through the streets, when she is found by Will, and after calming her down, the young man sets off in the direction of his friend's house. Meanwhile, Mark is looking at the photographs he had of his perished brother, at which point he starts to hear noises coming from the bathroom. On checking the room, he realizes that there is no one there and decides to take his pills to stay awake so that he won't be attacked. Before he can do this, Mark is surprised by Freddy, who gives him a fright and drops his last medicine down the sink. Thanks to this, the young man begins to despair and sees his brother appearing in the bathtub in front of him. Soon afterwards, Mark has his feet trapped by several macabre tentacles and starts screaming for someone to wake him up, while Freddy laughs uncontrollably. At the same time, Will and Lorie arrive at the young man's home, but all the entrances are locked, and thanks to this, the pair have no way of rescuing their friend. In his nightmare, Freddy manages to capture Mark and claims that he will use him to send a message to everyone. The monster then throws his victim against the wall, who sets his back on fire, causing the same thing to happen in real life. Despite their panic, the youngsters can do nothing but watch as their companion is brutally eliminated, his face scratched by Freddy's claws. Finally, the nightmare manipulator sticks his message into Mark's back, saying that the much-feared Freddy Krueger is finally back. Hours later, the group of young people get together to find out what's going on, at which point they are visited by Officer Stubbs, who reveals everything he knows about Jason so far. Thanks to this, the survivors realize that it was Freddy who brought Jason back to life, and during the discussion, Lorie ends up falling asleep, causing her to have another nightmare, where she sees her friends and family trying to eliminate her. Soon afterwards, the young woman sees Freddy about to attack her, but she is quickly rescued by her colleagues, and when she opens her eyes, she sees a human ear in her hand. Frightened, Lorie throws the human piece to the ground, causing it to become a handful of macabre bigots. With the situation under control, Will remembers that Freddy only attacks his victims during their dreams, and decides to take the group to the psychiatric hospital so that they can steal the dream suppression pills. As soon as they enter the place, the group decides to split up to look for the drugs, and they end up alerting the security guard, who sets off to check out what's going on. Minutes later, Freeberg ends up alone in one of the rooms so that he can have a smoke, but within a few seconds, he enters a state of illusion, causing him to see a macabre slug in front of him. At that moment, the creature uses a device of narcotic products in front of the young man, who is excited by everything he is seeing, and decides to follow it. In doing so, Freeberg reaches a room with patients in a vegetative state, who stand up and start whispering in his direction, revealing the location of the dream suppression pills. However, it was all just a trap, and as soon as he picks up the drugs, the young man is surprised by the slug, which enters his body. Realizing that Freeberg has disappeared, Stubbs and Linderman run to look for him, and when they return to the room, they find the young man pouring all the pills down the sink. Soon afterwards, the pair are surprised by Jason, who misses his shot and hits the power panel, causing him to be electrocuted. Before he can escape, Stubbs is grabbed by the monster, and thanks to this, the officer is quickly eliminated by the electrical discharge. Desperate, Linderman grabs the policeman's gun and starts running, while Freddy, who is possessing Freeberg's body, goes to the tranquilizer cabinet. Seconds later, the trio of young men are surprised by Jason and run desperately along with Linderman. At the same time, Freddy uses Freeberg's body to inject his tranquilizer syringes into Jason's neck, who, before falling to the ground, splits the young man's body in half with his machete. Now unconscious, the masked monster is surprised by Freddy, who insults him by turning him into his mother. Soon afterwards, the nightmare manipulator lunges at Jason, who easily removes his arms. Despite this, Freddy manages to regenerate. In order to hurt him even more, Freddy thrusts the monster's machete into his stomach, and in a rage, Jason removes the blade, trying to strike back. However, the nightmare manipulator manages to teleport away and starts throwing his opponent all over the place while dancing in a crazy manner. To finish off his opponent, the monster throws his enemy away, causing him to hit the pipes, causing water to leak into the room. Thanks to this, Jason gets scared, and noticing that his opponent is afraid of water, Freddy increases the intensity of the flooding. This causes the monster to be transformed back into its child version, allowing Freddy to win the battle. Meanwhile, the group takes Jason to the ancient lake of Crystal Lake with their van, so that he has an advantage in the fight against the nightmare manipulator, who will be summoned by Lorie. As soon as they approach the site, the young woman lies down to sleep and tries to rescue little Jason from the moment he was thrown into the lake, but Freddy is quicker and starts to pull him down. At the same time, the monster ends up waking up inside the van, causing a huge accident and causing him to be thrown far away, freeing him from the nightmare. Furious, Freddy jumps out of the water towards Lorie, and despite being frightened, the young woman charges at him. After recovering from the accident, the group carries their friend to the cabin on the lake, while Lorie tries to survive after being sent to her home on the night her father eliminated her mother. As soon as she tries to stop the man from attacking her, Lorie realizes that it's actually Freddy, who lunges at her and starts slashing her body with his claws. Desperate, Will tries to wake her up, at which point Jason arrives at the cabin. Thanks to the destruction, a fire breaks out, and before he can escape, Will is hit by a cut on his back. Soon after, Kia and Linderman use a table to trap the monster's blade, allowing the young woman to attack him with a piece of wood. However, Jason manages to throw her away, and as much as Linderman tries to attack him, he is not stunned, and hits him with a powerful blow, causing the young man to hit his head against a metal shelf. So that they can escape, Kia takes her friend outside, and Will tries to get Lorie out of the cabin, but at that moment, the young woman's hand ends up in the fire, and the pain causes her to wake up. Thanks to this, Freddy appears in the middle of the scene, and when he comes face to face with his arch-enemy, Jason jumps on him and throws him away. Soon afterwards, the masked monster goes through all the windows with his opponent's body, which is thrown towards the other cabin. In the forest, the pair hide among the surrounding trees, and realizing that they have no chance of survival, Linderman orders Kia to leave, and as soon as the young woman walks away, he loses his strength. Before they can leave the camp, Will and Lorie are surprised by Freddy, and in order to save her friends, Kia draws his attention with various insults. However, the young woman ends up being attacked by Jason, who eliminates her with a single blow, leaving Lorie furious. Soon after, Freddy goes after Jason, and after a few seconds of intense fighting, he is thrown towards some oxygen tanks. The monster quickly uses the cylinders to hit his opponent, who ends up being knocked down by the projectiles. Freddy then throws several metal stakes at Jason, immobilizing him and allowing him to hit him with one of the giant funnels. In order to crush him, the nightmare manipulator tries to push one of the containers towards him, but the object ends up getting stuck on the ramp, and soon afterwards, the funnel collides with the platform, causing it to be knocked over. Thanks to this, Freddy has his leg trapped by the rope, and as soon as he manages to pull him close, Jason tries to attack his opponent. At the same time, the impact of the funnel causes the container to break open and hit the monsters, who are thrown onto the pier, where they continue their fight. Freddy then manages to remove Jason's fingers and starts attacking him with his own weapon, while the survivors pour fuel all over the pier. To finish off his opponent, Freddy pierces the monster's eyes with his claws, while Lorie sets fire to the ground. Thanks to the distraction, Jason manages to cross his enemy's body with his bare hands. At that moment, the fire unleashes a huge explosion, which throws both monsters into the water. On their way back to the pier, the pair of youngsters are surprised by Freddy, but before he can eliminate them, the monster is attacked by Jason, who pierces his body with one of his removed arms. In revenge, Lorie takes the masked monster's machete and removes Kruger's head, which is finally defeated. Finally, the young woman throws Jason's weapon back into the lake, so that it can sink with him. Now that they are safe, the survivors leave, and hours later, Jason emerges from the depths of the lake holding the head of Freddy Krueger, who reveals that he is still alive after all this chaos. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.